I'm Dolly Brunei. What is a psychic? What is a psychic really? Well, to understand what a psychic is, because there are people who claim to be psychics or who are called psychics, and to understand that, we must first accept, understand, comprehend that the world is a mental construct. It's not a hard and physical like it seems. It's like in a dream. It's a product of the mind. The images, my images, your images, are telepathically transmitting to one another. And being this is the case, if all is mind, then we have mind surrounding us. Our ancestors are here. Our incarnational selves, we have past incarnational selves and we'll have future selves. And so we must accept that idea that there are non-physical and physical beings, which is just simply that the non-physical being is like us, except we don't see them. They see us. We don't see them because they're at a little bit higher, less dense plane where we don't see their image, even though they project an image. So there's not really much difference between a physical and a non-physical being, who we call ghosts, and make it mysterious. Now, a psychic, all that psychic needs to do is be in contact with one non-physical being, and then the whole universe is available to him if that non-physical being is of a somewhat elevated nature. Because through the inner mind, everything is available. All the records of history, the nature of your loved ones, where they are, and they're accessible, or they may be accessible to you through an inner non-physical being. And to understand who we should listen to, the physical beings we can communicate with telepathically, but they can, like here, they can withhold information, lie, and deceive. But non-physical beings cannot do that. When they think something, it just comes out, or they can't intercept something and massage it and change it. So this is the first thing that a person who dies learns, as metaphysical books generally all say the same thing here. When you die, you suddenly find that you can't control your words. They just come out. If there's someone you didn't like, an uncle you hated, it just comes out, and then you get really embarrassed. But the spirits laugh because they think it's funny because they had to go through the same thing. And so that's why you want to control your thoughts and learn to essentially love everybody and not see other people as bad just because they don't think like you do. So a psychic is someone who has contact with a non-physical being and can get that information from that being or multiple beings. Arthur Ford was a psychic. Ruth Montgomery wrote about him. She did automatic typing, where she'd get on a keyboard, hold her fingers, and her spirit, she called Lily, he would type for her, and she wrote several books, and a number of books in that way. And I don't think Lily was the most highest of entities, but she even recognized they were often wrong about predictions and things, but they were genuine. And so Arthur Ford had and Arthur Ford, when he died, he became in the spirit and started talking to her through her typewriter. And he wrote A World Beyond by Ruth Montgomery. I think it was in about the early 70s it was printed, but it's a good kind of starter book. But there are more advanced entities. Seth of Jane Roberts is way advanced. I've never found anyone more advanced than Seth. He's accurate on everything, and he has the best information. And so the Seth material by Jane Roberts is what I would recommend most. So Jane didn't want to be called a psychic. She just, she wasn't trying to do anything like that. It just fell into her lap. But Seth said she is a psychic. By our definition, she was a psychic because she was in communication with the spirit beyond the grave and channeling information. So what you'll probably, or what happened to me was my dad, who after he died, I felt his presence, and eventually I became in internal contact with him. So by that definition, he would be a psychic. But I don't use the term myself, because anybody could be psychic. It's not, but that anyway. So I trusted my dad, and I knew it was him because I could sense it was him, and we communicated telepathically, but through also subtle head nods. I could feel him nodding yes or no, and to confirm the telepathy was what he was. I was picking up what he was thinking, and he introduced me to Seth. Seth, I had read his books, but I didn't know I was going to be in contact with him, and I became in contact with Seth. I became in really close contact with him at the time of the 2020 lockdown. And then Seth told me, he said, get with Cleopatra. Now, I already knew from what he was telling me that Cleopatra was my first incarnation, Cleopatra the 7th of Egypt. She was my first incarnation, and I'm the 7th. So there's been six others, or 6 total, and then me. And as soon as he said that, within seconds, she was talking to me, and I could hear her, but it wasn't outward, it was an inner voice. And she told me that we have, this is the end of an era, and she said all my 7 would combine into me, and if we could combine, then we'd break the cycle of reincarnation, which Buddhists or other religions and Western metaphysics, that's their goal, is to break the cycle of reincarnation. Will the circle be unbroken? Break that cycle and end the suffering caused by having repeated lives, dying and being reborn. And so she told me, alternatively, I could turn and go back, and we could all resolve into her, which I decided to do. I've said this in some of my books and the intros generally. So, in this sense, I would be considered a psychic by the definition. But psychics can be anybody can be a psychic. All you have to do is get into contact with a deceased relative or friend. And Arthur Ford was in World War I, and Fletcher was his buddy, his war buddy. And Fletcher said, I guess he got shot and he was dying, and he told Arthur that he would stay with him until Ford died. And so Fletcher was his contact, his internal contact, and that made him a psychic. So essentially, a psychic is anyone who makes contact with a deceased relative, a friend, or an authority, or anyone. So it's not a mystery. Anybody can do it, and many people do, but they keep it secret because they're called crazy. You're not supposed to believe that in our world of modern science. In Hinduism, it's okay. Buddhists they strive for that, ending the cycle of reincarnation. But our society doesn't believe in that. They don't go there. You just don't do that. You don't know that. Now, if you're in touch with a friend who's physical, then you have telepathic communication. You wouldn't be a psychic because you wouldn't, unless if that person has communication with an internal self, and you internally are in communication with the friend who's physical, then you might be considered psychic because they can transmit that information to you. It's like a big transmission system. Science can do it, but they're only symbolizing what actually is natural, happens naturally. We're all interconnected. And so my goal here was to explain what a psychic is, and I think I've done that. So thank you.